All right. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Randall Hill. I'm a member of the Alma La Vida team, and I'm going to be hanging out with you guys and Coach Jen today while she teaches us all about how to create a space to help foster team innovation and creativity. So, before I hand it over to Jen, I'm going to give a couple housekeeping rules about Zoom. We're going to ask you guys to stay muted. Myself and one of our fellow coaches, I don't know why I'm pointing to her on the screen because everybody's Zoom screen looks different, but she's right here on my screen. Myself and one of the other coaches, Coach Jill, will be in the chat if you guys have questions or tech issues or anything like that. Coach Jen is going to end this webinar out with some QA time. So if you do have questions, don't hesitate to drop them in there. Coach Jill and I will keep a list and we will make sure that all of those get answered during the question and answer time. We're also going to send out a recording of this webinar. So if you have to hop off work early or have kind of like some spacey internet for a few minutes, don't worry, you'll get this full session sent to your inbox later this afternoon for you to review at your leisure. So with that all being said, I'm going to take a quick minute here to tell you a little bit about Alma La Vida, and then I'm going to pass it over to Coach Jen. Alma La Vida is a coaching company. We coach in all areas of life, career leadership, life, and health coaching. So today we have Coach Jen with us. She is one of our leadership coaches. I need another cup of coffee today, apparently. She's going to be teaching us about how to better manage our teams to create safe spaces for them to innovate and maximize their creativity. A lot of what she's going to be talking about is also referenced and taught in our Elevate coaching program, which helps you really learn to love your life as manager. So with all that being said, Jen, I'm going to stop talking and let you take it away.
Perfect. Can you see my screen, Randall? And can you confirm you're seeing that?
I can, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I was waiting to see what's she going to call me today. Like what's going to come out? I was excited. I didn't know what you were going to say. So I went back just a step here to just reiterate again. So we're talking about creating a safe work environment in order to foster creativity. And I'm going to highlight in what we're going to cover, what that looks like and what that means for the sake of the conversation today. But as Randall mentioned, yes, I am a leadership coach. Most of you who are here maybe have even attended one of the other webinars that I've done, so you've possibly heard from me before, but I am one of the coaches that does leadership coaching with Alma La Vida, very specifically in our Elevate coaching program, which I am going to talk a little bit about today. Periodically, as Randall mentioned, sort of through the conversation, and at the end I'll share some details on it. We've talked about it in some of our other webinars and meetings and conversations in the past, but I thought it'd be fun to go into detail a little bit more today, so you'll see a little bit more of that information so you have a clear picture of what it means when we say Elevate and what this program is all about. So I'll share a bit about that. Most of my coaching career has been in corporate America, and after doing it for about 10 years, I left to start my own business and then eventually made my way here to Alma La Vida. One of the reasons that I love working with Alma La Vida is actually the proprietary methodology that we use and the e-coaching suite of tools that we use. I'm kind of obsessed with having maximized time with your coach through not only the one-on-one interaction, but through the external outside of that one-on-one time, in which case will be this module thing that I'll talk to you more about in case it's not familiar to you, but also just special assignments and homework and extra things that you can do outside of your coaching time. So coaching really is a lot more than just that one-on-one time, and that's something that Alma La Vida truly values, and you guys not only have seen it probably just through our conversations we've had here, but I'll share it within the program content as well today. Okay, so like I mentioned, what we're going to be talking about, I want to touch on these things on the agenda maybe a little bit more than I normally would. So we're going to talk about what is a safe work environment. We used the word safe, but that's a pretty flexible kind of word. There's a lot of words we could probably fill in there. So what does it really look like to have what would even be a good or healthy work environment right now? What can we do? I put that terminology on there because I want you to really be thinking about what does yours look like now, and possibly what are some things that you can shift or change. So we are going to talk some really specific components, and that's where bullet 3 comes in with this culture and creativity impact. I want to give you actual ideas, some tangible ideas, as if you were going and Googling, how can I create a creative work environment? And you found some, 10 tips or something, an article, right? We're going to kind of take that approach a little bit today, because I want you to not only understand what it means and why it's important, think about, what it looks like for you now and how you might need to change or pivot what's going on, and then also have some real tangible components to take away with you. I want to approach this a little bit differently today as well. So for those of you who are on the phone and participating live, feel free to put something in the chat at any time, not only a question, of course, if you have one, but if I mention an idea or I say, hey, here's a creative thing you can do with your team. If you're doing something similar, or maybe it's even completely different, but it worked really well, I would encourage you to put that in the chat and just share it. So this is what I call leaders teaching leaders. I really want all of you to be engaged and involved in this process. So if you've got something really great that you think others could learn and value from it, please don't hesitate to type it in. Randall will pipe in and share it for us, or Jill, both of them are on the call today. So that is going to be a really sort of impactful additional component that we can have. So please don't hesitate to share as we go through. Okay, so what is a safe work environment? So when I think about a safe work environment, I think about this concept of psychological safety. And psychological safety just means that everyone feels like they can be heard. There's no fear of retaliation. They really understand that when we all get in this space, it's a trusting space. I can be honest, and I don't have to have anxiety around being honest. I can say what I need to say, and I don't have to worry about how my manager is going to react or my coworker is going to react. There can be conflict, right? We always say conflict can be a healthy thing, but it's just a matter of how we're dealing with and what we're moving through all of this. If you have attended one of my webinars in the past, we did one on emotional intelligence, right? And we talked a lot about this idea of self-awareness and self-regulation and empathy. So how can you really hone in and use some of those emotional intelligence skills as a leader to create that psychologically safe workplace for all? And I'm going to go into just a couple specifics that I think will be beneficial and impactful for the conversation today. So the first one, when we think about psychological safety, I want you to just think about building that safe environment around you so that people can speak up. Forum and I led a webinar the other day around bias, and we talked about this quite a bit, and just how easy it is for us to have our own internal and innate biases that can really sort of change the direction of things. We might have people that we have a tendency to be more comfortable speaking with, or people who are on the same, we'll say, wavelength, right? That can be a bias in itself. We connect via our wavelengths. So are we only connecting with people who are on the same wavelength as us, or skill set as us? Are we somehow alienating folks on the team? Maybe it is because they look different or dress different or talk different, but maybe it's also just because they don't get it, right? They don't get it. They're not with us. They don't get it. So just making sure you're really building that safe and work environment so that everyone's feeling like they're included in a part of the conversation and is comfortable speaking up. They're not afraid of that retaliation. Lead with curiosity is very much something that we preach even just within the Elevate program itself. We want you all to be thinking about how you can show up as a coach within your leadership. So how can you ask really deep, strong, genuine, and authentic questions of people so that when you're having these conversations, whether it's one-on-one, staff meeting, it doesn't matter, they really feel like you are listening to what they're saying. They really feel like you care. You're not just saying, how are you? You're saying, no, how are you today? What is really going on for you? It's with that deeper level of curiosity and intention. So just to really engage people in a way where they know that if they come to you, you're going to care. You're going to care, right? It goes back to that sort of caring concept. Approach conflict in a collaborative way. So I just mentioned conflict a minute ago. It can be fine, right? Conflict can be fine. We want sort of that almost like diversified idea of thought, right? We want everyone to bring in these unique perspectives. So how do we do so in a way where we can recognize that we can all learn something from it, or we can sit down and have that collaborative discussion where that we can all not only have our opinions be heard, but really use all that data to come up with a really positive solution going forward as a group. So just a couple of questions to be thinking about and asking yourself. So Am I approachable to open in different perspectives without getting defensive or without retaliating? You know, it's kind of that very natural instinct. Sometimes someone provides us unhealthy feedback, or excuse me, healthy feedback, but we don't like it, right? It's scary. It's against what I think, or it feels like, oh my gosh, I can't feel like they're beating me up or something. It's easy for us to kind of go into that sort of defensive or retaliation type mode. So are you being receptive and open to feedback and conversation, and what are you doing? How are you reacting? How your behavior is showing up? Am I actively listening to others and their concerns? And it goes back again to that deep active listening, not just cutting them off, really getting all the way through the conversation, and then asking those genuinely curious, deep questions to keep the conversation going. And then, do people around me feel comfortable being vulnerable? So I could sit here and tell you all day as a leader to be vulnerable and transparent, but is everyone else doing the same thing too? Are they just as willing to open up and share some of that really critical information? So creating that space, if you can capture and create that space, you're going to be moving a lot quicker into that mode of being creative, having that high morale, having that high team engagement that we want. Okay, trust. So I alluded to some of this already, but I think there's some really important things to just add here. Be vulnerable and transparent. This is probably the thing that I say to every leader the most, to the point where they probably get tired of me saying it almost, because it's just, there's so much truth to it. So we can say communicate, communicate, communicate all day long, and that's true, but anyone can put some bullets on an email and call it communication. So how are you going beyond just bullets on an email and really being vulnerable, really being transparent, and truly opening up in order to build that level of trust? It's one thing to tell the team, you know, the company is not doing real great right now, so keep up the good work. We got this. But it's another to say, hey guys, you know, the company is really struggling right now. Here's where our financials are. Here's specifically some things that we can all do. Do any of you have some ideas? Let's talk about this together, right? Really sort of opening it up to that more all-inclusive conversation. Honesty, I mean, obviously a perfect segue from this vulnerability and transparency component. But what's important with honesty too is, and I mentioned this before, but just being really genuine and authentic about it. So, you know, you can't just come in all of a sudden, flip a switch and try to be warm, friendly, and fuzzy with everyone if you've never been that way a day in your life. It's not going to feel authentic to them. They're going to be like, who is this new manager that showed up? And I'm even more scared of him now than I was before. So how do you kind of slowly segue into that? And honesty is a good piece of that. Using that vulnerability and that transparency and that honesty all together to start to build some of that trust. Admit when you don't know something, right? If you made a mistake, you know, have you had a failure? Did you pick the wrong solution? It's okay to share that and have that, again, goes back to this sort of vulnerable moment, but it makes you be more human. It makes you be more genuine. It's going to build that trust within your team. One thing I always like to tell managers is if you do like an employee survey, whether it's you individually or the company overall, that's great, right? We can use this as a great way to collect information, but the only way to use that information and build trust through it is to actually follow through and do something with that information. So if employees tell you that they're frustrated because of X, well, what are you going to do to solve for X? There has to be some sort of actual follow through, not just, we've heard you, and we listened, and we actually are going to take some action there. But this is a really good thing you can do now. You don't have to be waiting for your annual survey by your company, right? You could do this right now. You can stop, you can level set a new expectation, have a strong conversation, survey folks, where are they at right now? The world's crazy. Ask them, where are they at right now? What is it you need to know? Put those specific questions in the survey and then work together to figure out how we're going to follow through to do whatever it is that we need to do, okay? I've mentioned actively listening a few times. That's important. Giving space for everyone to share, you know, in those staff meetings, are you really opening it up so that everyone has a chance to talk, you know, not just the leaders only, not just the managers only, not just the people who have a tendency to always raise their hand. How do we really make sure everyone gets that chance to share? Maybe even some of the folks that are typically a little quieter or choose not to raise their hand right away. What's a comfortable way to do that? So thinking about that individually for your people and what you know of them and how you can create that space. The last bullet I just kind of skipped over here, but don't operate in a vacuum. I do think that that's really important. Explain your thought process and what's going on. So if you're creating, it could be if you're creating a new process for the team, you know, why? What are you doing? How are you doing it? What's the impact? How does it impact them? or, you know, if you're taking an action to create, you know, bring some new thing into the group, like what's going on? What is this new thing? Why do I care? What do I need to know about it? You know, again, just allow them to have that information, be vulnerable and transparent, and do it along with them on the journey. I always tell folks, I work with clients often, and they'll say, gosh, you know, I sat down with I'm gonna use an example like my partner, right? I sat down with my partner and I had this conversation. I'm so excited. I decided I was going to change my career. I've been thinking about this for a year. I even worked with a coach a little bit. I rewrote my resume. I started applying for some jobs, and what do you know? I got this job interview. So now I sit down and I tell my partner, I have the best news ever. I have this job interview for job blah blah blah. And they just look at me with a blank face and are so confused as to what's going on. Well, think about it, like put yourself in their shoes. This is out of the blue for them. Like, did you do all this in your head in a vacuum? My husband's an engineer, so I feel like that's 90% of our life. I have to remind him, like, hey, don't have this conversation by yourself in your head. Have it with me. Let's do it together. But bring those people along on the journey. I use the partner one, the relationship one, because it's an easy example. But anytime you can be bringing people along with you on the journey, the better it's going to be. Okay, so I'm going to segue into some tools, but I'm going to do just a quick pause. Randall-Lynn, any questions or anything that so far?
Yes, I just got one. It would be interesting to hear what's typically different with a diverse versus somewhat uniform team, roles, tenure at work, company, etc., to meet the challenges and opportunities that come with diversity.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and this is more conversational than question based. I would say think about your own teams, and if you only have had one, maybe even find if you have a mentor, peer, partner, friend, anyone else that you kind of ask that question to. It'd be interesting to get perspective from a lot of different people. Okay, so that would be sort of an action assignment right there. Go see who else you can talk to about it. I know from myself, I've worked on a number of teams that have had really just different types of diversity, especially, so most of my career I mentioned was at Boeing. So there's been times where more like project management based teams where you've got people from finance, you have people from engineering, you have people from mechanics on the shop floor, right? You've got sort of this variety, and you wouldn't necessarily always think that that's going to generate some crazy uniqueness, but it absolutely does, especially when you're all working on one project and trying to get one thing done. So it has a tendency to bring a little bit more natural conflict in. So then there's a little bit more nurturing of how do we make this healthy conflict and healthy discussion. And that's because you're bringing in all those unique ideas and perspectives. And I think that's exactly what we all need, right? That this is not just Jen's opinion, really. It's the wide scale belief that, you know, the more diverse ideas that we can bring together, the more likely we are to impact bigger change, because you don't have just group think, right? If we have a non-diverse team, we get a lot of this group think. One person comes in, I think we should do this. Yep, that sounds good. Yep. Everyone's on board. Well, we didn't even spend any time thinking about other possible solutions, and we could have missed, you know, this huge moneymaker over here or something to that effect. So I think the type of diversity will shift the way it shows up, but for the most part, it's just going to avoid those group thinks. It's going to bring in a lot more opportunities for growth and potential, but it will be harder. There will be conflict along the way there. And this is why it's like, you know, hey, from a leadership perspective, how do I make sure I'm handling that? Am I doing all of my skills of actively listening, asking deep questions, and providing effective feedback? You know, these are those components of the Elevate program we talk about all the time. How do you really provide effective feedback? I've mentioned it once on a webinar. We'll do it again. I think it's either a couple weeks or a month. I lose the timing of these things, but it'll be on your email you'll get later. But my point being, we can have these conversations briefly in 30 minutes in here, but let's drill in for your each individual situation and how are you providing feedback effectively so that your team is growing, because it's going to look different from every individual. We have a framework to get you started, but it will be different with every individual. So I think every team's a little bit different, and really just shoring up on some of those key leadership skills and understanding how to work through conflict is going to be probably the best way to ensure that you're maximizing what you're getting, all while recognizing that it's not going to be easy along the way. It's kind of a long-winded statement, but anything else, Randall-Lynn?
Nope, that's it for now.
Okay, great. So let's see. I can't remember if I put one or two tools in here. I think it's just one, so I apologize if it is two. But I wanted to talk briefly about the ladder of inference. This is just very applicable to, I would say, just about any leadership conversation we can be having. We talk about this individually in the Elevate program. There's not a module, but it's truly like, hey, what's a real life situation that happened for you? Manager comes in and tells me a real life situation. Hey, what happened in that situation? Did you jump up the ladder? Did you stay at the bottom? What did you do? And so my point being, it's a tool that we can use in just about any situation, and it will come up regularly. If you are not familiar with the ladder of inference, I would even just suggest going to Google or YouTube and just typing in ladder of inference. There's some just really good basic videos that you can watch out there, but you can kind of see the literal ladder on the left and the rungs. And what we want to be thinking about is we are constantly, it's just our innate ability within our brain. We are always wanting to draw meaning and inference from what others say and do. And that's typically based on past experience. So whether it's based on the past experience with that individual or something that we've experienced, in our life. But the idea being we're trying to solve all the time. We're drawing meaning and we're inferring based off of what others see and do. So classic example, employee comes into staff meeting 10 minutes late. They look a little frazzled. They sit down. They're on their phone. They're distracted. They're not paying attention. Sometimes as a leader, it's very easy for us to run up the ladder and draw a conclusion that, well, clearly the X, Y, and Z has happened, right? Like we just assume something's going on. And then we adopt a belief. So, well, clearly they're lazy. They're lazy, and this affirms that from the last time that they were late. And now I really know they're lazy because they've done it twice in a row. They're just not a good employee. I'm just not happy with this individual. And then the action might be literal. Maybe you take an action upon them, a personal personal growth type action, or termination, or something extreme even, or it's just, I'm no longer going to assign them tasks because they're lazy. I'm no longer going to be working on developing them because they're lazy. I am now withdrawing their promotion from the table because they're lazy, right? So you've sort of inferred some of these innate biases, and you've inferred some things, and you've jumped way up the ladder, when in reality, it's like, okay, scroll it back down. Let's start at the bottom. Let's really observe what's going on and collect some information, even if that means I need to go do a little bit more work. I need to talk to them after the staff meeting or something, but I need to really truly understand the data that's going on so that I can add the right meaning and make the right assumptions and draw the right conclusions and on up. So questions to sort of ask yourself regularly: how can I pause lower on the ladder? So if you see or feel yourself jumping up to these assumptions, it's a really good time to stop and pause and bring your way down. Why do I keep doing that? Where is it coming from? Like, ask yourself that question. Is it because I'm seeing a repeated behavior? Is it because I had a bad experience with so-and-so? Like, whatever it is, kind of what's going on there. But I think more than ever, this is really important. So here we're talking about this kind of crazy world that we're in now that looks a little bit different, where people are stressed, anxiety is high. Maybe they're working remote and they never have before. Maybe the whole company's gone remote, and it used to be an anti-remote company, right? Cultures are changing, things are evolving. Whether you are going back into the office right now or not, the reality is the last 3 to 4 months were very different for a variety of reasons, and things are changing. So we need to kind of stop and level set and really figure out what's going on. And as leaders, we need to really pause and say, what assumptions have I made about people? When they don't turn the camera on in a meeting, what am I thinking? Am I thinking something, or maybe I'm not? Or maybe the reverse is true. Theirs is on and mine is off. And what am I thinking that means? Do they dress a little sloppier than usual? Are they late? Are they always muting? Are they walking away from their camera, walking back? Are the kids running in? Is the cat walking across the screen? Do they look like they're going to fall asleep? Are they taking notes? Are they not taking notes? Like, what are those things that you're observing, and what assumptions are you potentially making? This is a good time to pause and have that check-in so that you can then go back to, how do I make sure I'm making that psychologically safe workspace and building that trust so that we can go forward and do some of these more creative things, so that we can grow, so that morale can be high when we know outside of work morale might be really low. Like, what can we be doing to make sure we're supporting people in this space that we're in right now? Any questions, Randalyn, on Ladder of Inference, or just kind of any of the thoughts that I shared there?
Not yet, but I'm sure people are still just soaking it in. So I will let you know if anything comes up.
Perfect. Okay, good. So I was right. Only one. So wasn't a surprise too. So now we're going to talk a little bit about specifics. So I shared a lot of that kind of pre-work, why that ladder of inference is good. And really that should almost be like the very first slide, but it can be a heavy content, so I didn't want to dive right in first. But I want to talk about some specifics. So some of this will be a little repetitive because that's how you're going to learn, is by hearing some of the same things over and over and over again. But I'm going to challenge all of you right now for the next, I think it's 3 slides that I'm about to go through. If you've done something recently that has really worked, please put it in the chat and share, and then Randall will share some of those. If you're not comfortable or you don't have a good example, that's totally fine, but I would love if any of you have thought of or found some things that are working really well, or maybe even a friend has told you about something that's working really well, that's fine. Please share it so that we can kind of all, leaders teaching leaders, learn from each other in this situation. I've got at least one I'm going to add that's not on my list here, and we'll see if any more jump in. And Randall and Jill, if you guys have anything to add too, then please do. So how can I take action in today's world? So I talk to you over and over and over again. Remember, here we go. You're going to hear me say it again. Coach Jen's talking about vulnerability and transparency. Number 1 lesson that I feel like every leader really needs to hear. So tell them how you're feeling. Tell them what you're trying to do. Be specific, what's going on. Have that level of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and go beyond just being a good communicator and turning it into real powerful communication. So maybe even if you're writing some notes right now, your version of good to great is take it from communication to vulnerable and transparent, something like that. How can I do something, taking something I'm already good at and make it even better, okay? So that's kind of an action for you right there. Virtual team building, one of people's least favorite and most favorite topics of conversation, depending on the type of person you are. I love icebreakers. Maybe that's because I'm a little kooky. I'm a little extroverted. I like to facilitate. I like to lead. I like to teach and train. So for me, icebreakers are like the funnest thing in the world. Some people hate them, and this could be a great opportunity for you as a leader to even ask your team, hey guys, do you want to do some icebreakers or fun activities? Maybe they'll say yes, even if you're saying no, and you're going, okay, well, I don't want to do it, but they all do, so I might as well try it. So just something to keep in mind. And this would be another one of those, hacks of the trade. Go out to Google and just type in like best icebreakers or COVID icebreakers or something. I mean, you'll find thousands of articles and ideas. They're out there. But here's a couple that people have shared with me. These are actual from real clients telling me things that they're doing with their teams or their managers are doing with them. So show and tell. I totally cracked up when a client told me about this one, but it was literally like, just share something from your home, just like you imagine in kindergarten. Share something from your home and tell us the story around it. And he said that some people would share like just a photo, and one person shared like their cat, so it's just unique things that were important to them that they wanted to show and tell. So that was kind of a fun way to break it up. Another person told me about doing like home and office tours where they would literally carry the computer around and like give people a tour of their home. Think about how strange that is. Like your work environment and your home environment are usually completely separated. Now we sort of weirdly merge them together. So it's kind of fun to let people into our house a little bit and allow them to see a little bit of who we are. So another thing that can be a little bit unique and fun to help build trust and build those relationships. Meet the family, meet the pet. Some of them we already do, whether we intentionally mean to or not, because the kids walk in the room or the cat walks across the desk or the dog barks or something. And so, but just taking it to that kind of next level and actually doing a little introduction and making them a part of the journey. I know my team here at Alma La Vida has been very gracious to let my daughter Grace join in on a lot of our staff meetings, and she's 6 and they just all are very sweet and hello Grace and how are you, and they talk to her and she just thinks that's really special, and she loves that opportunity to get on for just a couple minutes and say hi and feel like she's a part of what mom is doing when I'm working in the house, but I'm not to be disturbed. Very complicated for a 6-year-old. Okay, so then the next thing I wrote down here was digital infrastructure and process. So I think this is important because it's challenging when we move to a new process and we know we need to document some processes or procedures, but there's a lot of unknowns. So think about back in March when that first time, the 14th or so, depending on where you lived, it was everyone go work from home. We're all quarantining. We were all like, okay, this is so weird. Like, what's happening? How long is this going to happen? Okay, I'll see you in 2 weeks. It was like we all thought for sure, right? I'll see you in 2 weeks. And then after 1 week, it was like, okay, it was pretty clear it wasn't going to be 2 weeks. Okay, it'll be a month. I'll see you in April. I'll be back in April. And it just, it kept going. And there are so many unknowns. So In the beginning, we didn't, other than like, hey, everyone quickly, here's Zoom and here's all the stuff that you need to make your meetings run. You know, we had to do those things quickly, but we didn't spend a lot of time setting up processes because we didn't really know what the future was going to hold. And I would argue that that's still the case now, even if you are starting to go back to work. And there are a lot of people, I've talked to quite a few today actually, who are starting to go back to the office. It looks very different, you know, and there's different ways around that. But what does some of that potential process look like that you need to go ahead and pause and implement so that everyone is really prepared? And from a digital infrastructure standpoint, do we have the right tools and procedures? Is it working? Is it not? You know, taking a moment to really just think through that and make sure that your people have exactly the resources that they need in order to be the most effective that they can be, even if it's just on their individual, you know, level. And that's really kind of what the set them up for success and resources component means is, you know, has somebody been complaining that they really need a new webcam? Let's get them a new webcam. Like, this is going to be going on for a while. So just really having those check-ins, and this is another reason those surveys can be really helpful. Okay, so a few more. Ask them what they need very specifically. So I put this on because I know I've said this a few times. It needs to be reiterated. You hear me say vulnerable and transparent a lot. Another thing you'll hear me say a lot as your coach is specific, 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 specific. This is extremely important. Think about, like, put yourself in your shoes in a conversation you're having with your manager. You went into your manager's office and your manager said, "How are you today?" "I'm fine, thanks." "Is there anything I can help you with?" "No, I'm good." "Okay, bye." And then that was the whole conversation. You wouldn't really feel like they valued you or your time, or they were really truly there for you. It felt more like they're pushing you out the door. The same is true when you have that conversation with your employees the same way. Sometimes it's harder for us to recognize it unless we flip it around and we put ourselves in their shoes, but it's the same thing. It should not be just, "How are you today?" It should be a little bit more specific. What's going on for you today? How are you really feeling? No, how are you really, really feeling? Like, even just adding those reallys in there might be helpful, right? And not, "What help do you need?" or "How can I help you?" It's, "How are things going with the Jefferson project? Are you getting all the information that you need to be successful?" Right? I mean, that's specific. Like, they can actually answer that. And not only that, if they say, "No, I'm not," then it opens up a door for conversation, versus if you just said, you know, "Do you need help?" and they said, "Yes, I need help," it might feel to them like, "Oh, I'm helpless. My manager asked me if I need help and I said yes. Oh, I'm helpless," right? So take them out of that mode where they feel helpless. Take them out of that mode where they feel like you don't really care. Be authentic, be genuine with those deep questions, and specifically ask them what is needed. One trick I always tell my leaders is, if you need a specific answer, think of the answer you need and turn that around into a question. So thinking about this trust thing, right? If you just want to know, do people feel safe speaking up in my staff meetings? How are you going to turn that around into a question that you can ask people one-on-one that they're going to be comfortable asking, versus just saying, "Does everyone feel safe in this space?" Right? So what does it look like? What's that deeper level of question? Maybe it looks different for Sally than it does for Bob. Maybe Bob's question is, "Do you feel comfortable speaking up in the staff meetings and asking questions of your peers? Do you feel comfortable speaking up in the staff meetings and feeling like I'm going to recognize what's being heard?" And maybe for Sally, it's more, when you speak, do you feel like people are actively listening to what you're saying in the meetings? You know, so the questions might be a little bit different for each of them, and you can tailor them, but really think specifically about what you as a leader need an answer to, and then find the right question that matches what it is you need the answer to. Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate the survey one again. If you survey them, take action. Survey is worthless if you do nothing with it. A survey is worthless if you say, "We've synthesized and collected the data, and here's what you've told us." A survey is worthless if you say, "We've synthesized and collected the data, here's what you told us, we're going to create some teams." I could keep going on and repeating myself here. It doesn't matter how much you synthesize the data, doesn't matter how many teams you create, doesn't matter how many times those teams actually meet. Until someone actually takes action and does something, it's worthless. So how are you going to ensure that you're actually taking action? You're not just forming some teams, okay? Tell and show them you care. I go back to this sort of emotional intelligence, empathy, bring it up. Maybe create a line item on your staff meeting that's health and wellness. You know, we now do a little health meeting every Tuesday evening, just so we have a space to get together and talk about what's going on. So what are you going to do to kind of really let them know that whatever is the thing we need to be focused on right now, whether it's psychological safety, whatever it is, like, put a line item on the agenda and make it really clear, this is important. I care about it. I want all of you to hear me and be able to participate. Boom, here's the line item on the agenda. We're going to do this regularly. This next bullet I have bolded. It says give everyone equal amounts of your time. And I really struggled with the right way to word that statement, to be honest with you. I went back and forth. I reworded it different ways. I settled on this, and it's probably not perfect, and I'll be the first one to admit I'm not perfect anyways. But my point here being, don't allow some of your biases or past experiences to exclude some folks within the group. So you might have, here's a good example. So you might have some people on your team who they just want to come in and punch the clock, right? Like that's just the reality. They don't want to grow to the next level. They don't want to be the leader. They don't want to go above and beyond. They just want to come in and punch the clock, okay? There is a lot of value in those people on the team, even though you might be really strongly driven and you might really flock to wanting to work with, develop, and grow those people who are strongly driven. And that's a good thing. You should be doing all of that. But in the meantime, don't do it as a detriment to those who aren't doing it, who are just wanting to come in and punch the clock. They still need your one-on-one time, right? They still need to have those opportunities to speak in staff meetings. So just make sure they're getting those fair amounts of opportunities to speak. You're not always calling on Sally. You're calling on, everyone in the room so that everyone's opinion can be heard, and that they all get your one-on-one time too. I think more managers are afraid to admit to me, and I know this is true because I eventually get it out of them, but they're often afraid to admit that I'll say, do you do one-on-ones? Yes, I do one-on-ones. Do you do ones with everyone on your team? Yeah, I'd say mostly, pretty consistently. Okay, fine. There are some people who maybe we meet with regularly and some we don't. That's about as deep as they'll go until I really start digging deeper. But usually what that means is there are a few people who are maybe strongly motivated. They meet with once a month or once a week or whatever their cadence is. And then the others, it's real easy. Oh, we're a little busy today. Let's let that one slide. Oh, someone booked over our one-on-one. Sorry, let's not do that. And it happens to be the same people who are being the ones who are impacted and affected a lot of the time, because you will make time for the people that you want to make time for. So take a hard look at that. Who are you having your one-on-ones with? Who are you making time for? And then who are you just accidentally letting slide, get rebooked over? And if it's happening to you the other way around, you're the one who your manager is having that occur to you for, stand up and speak for your time. So just something to kind of think about there. So even though it's worded a little bit weirdly, equal amounts of your time, I just want to be sure you're making sure that everyone is at least getting the same opportunities to have one-on-ones, the same opportunities to speak in staff meetings, the same opportunities to be heard. Hopefully you get my point with that one. Don't be afraid to develop your own culture. I've had a lot of people talk about this in this COVID world where it's hard sometimes to even be connected to the big company if we work at a big company. When we're in this, we went from all being together in office to now being remote. So how do you just start to create your own little dynamic of your own little company culture, and that's okay to do too. Like your own team can have its own culture, especially in this crazy world. So be thinking about what that might look like, or talk to your team about how they might want to do it as well. Okay, and then this is my reminder again to ask all of you. So leaders teaching leaders, if anyone has any great examples that they want to share, please don't hesitate to put those in the chat. They'll be seen on the recording as well. Okay, so a couple questions that I'm just going to put here for you to sort of summarize some of the thoughts up. So let's get specific again. Ask yourself some of the following. You've heard me say some of this already, but what do I know right now that I need to be doing a little bit better? What do I need to change? What do I need to be doing better at? So I've sort of alluded, dropped some hints along the way of things that you could be thinking about. And I like the word better because it doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you want to get better, right? It's the good to great concept. Like it's okay to be a good communicator, but I want to be a great communicator. How do I become a great communicator? By being a little bit more vulnerable and transparent, changing up the style, building trust, etc. So what can you do right now that you could possibly be just a little bit better on? How can I be more inclusive? Are you potentially, like we just talked about, dropping some people's one-on-ones and not others? Maybe you didn't even know you were doing it, but you're recognizing now that we're talking about it that it's occurring, whether it was intentional or not, right? It could even be unintentional. It could just be that it just so happens that Sally's one-on-ones have been lost for the last 2 months and I've met with everyone else. Well, poor Sally, let's get her back on track. So just be thinking about that. What can I do to be a little bit more inclusive? Is anyone feeling unsafe, scared, intimidated? Here we go back to the psychological safety piece. Are they all comfortable speaking up in that meeting? Are they worried there's going to be retaliation? from you or someone else. It could even be someone else on the team that is doing that. It doesn't matter who it is, but is that safe space created? What assumptions have I been making about my team? So thinking about that ladder of inference, you know, when I'm seeing them on the Zoom meeting, when their kids are popping into the room, or maybe when I call an employee, they don't answer the phone right away. Well, and I happen to know their kids are home with them. So clearly they're not working, they're just doing something with their kids. I mean, they're getting their work done, so it's okay, but it's really frustrating that I can't reach them at that exact moment that I need to reach them. Where are you jumping up the ladder? What assumptions are you making? I mean, they could have been in the bathroom for all we know, right? Like, so really be cautious about that, and then challenge your own beliefs, because we're in this world now where, yeah, so what if their kids are home with them? If they are getting all their work done and more, even if it takes them a 12-hour spread of the day, 8 to 8 instead of 9 to 5, then maybe that's okay. And we need to be thinking about, you know, what that means and what that looks like, and how every individual might be a little bit unique. Does my team trust me? Do they trust you now? Are they coming to you now in a way that demonstrates and shows trust? If you can't answer that question, let's dig in a little bit deeper and talk about what's going on there and how we can really check on it and figure out what's going on for you. And do I know what I need to do? So what action do I need to take today in order to continue to create a little bit more of that psychological safety, create some more of that creativity, you know, grow trust, grow morale, grow team engagement, all of those things that are going to lead to really good longer term things as well, things we haven't even started to think about. Like, can you imagine 6 months to a year from now? It's hard to even think about it, but it's there. So we need to be thinking about all those things as well. Okay, so just kind of really quickly putting it all together, you are going to get a copy of these slides. You can go back and review some of the questions that were in here, be thinking about some of the bullets that we shared. But from that psychological safety standpoint, what is it? Why do we care about it? Why is it important? What's going on there overall? We talked about this concept of really building trust. And again, I would harp on, there's so much value in this concept of building trust. If you are unsure, start to really do some deep reflection and figure out what's going on there. Work with a coach. What's going on? Do I have trust? Do I not? How do I even know, right? So let's start to dig into that. And then reflect and act with specific steps. So I put some ideas here. Hopefully you kind of took down some notes as you went along as well, in case there were any other ideas or things that popped into your head. But again, just what are some of the very specific things that you can do? Take action and do the work. This is always my fourth bullet on all of the putting it togethers. So go back if you need to, read some of these slides again, be thinking through the questions, look back at the notes that you took in the conversation, what really stood out for you, and what actions can you start to take today. Okay, last kind of reflection. This is another one, take it home with you. Questions, we kind of ask about the same ones each time. So refer back to this later so that you can go back and really think about your reflection. And then how will you be held accountable to some of these things? So will it be through myself? You're welcome to email me. Will it be through leadership coaching process? We're going to talk Elevate in a minute here. You know, do you have a peer manager or someone? Just be thinking about who's going to hold you accountable to these changes. Because it's one thing to say we're going to do it, but are we able to hold ourselves accountable, or do we need to get someone to support us on the way? Be thinking about that. Okay, so we always tell you we can support you every step of the way, and we being the whole Alma La Vida team. If you didn't know, we have 17, I just asked earlier today, I think it's 17 was the number, coaches here at Alma La Vida. So you might be hearing from me today, but there are many others of us that are around as well. And one of the programs that we as a company offer, specifically in the leadership coaching, is the Elevate method. This is the one that I talk about a lot. This is where, you know, I live and breathe and work in my leadership coaching time, along with a couple other coaches within the company. And in Elevate, what's really important, and I'm going to highlight some of this for you as we go through, but we do this combination of the one-on-one coaching, but we also then utilize what we call e-coaching modules in order to really mimic the experience of working sort of at that higher caliber, so that it's super high touch. So it feels like when you're doing the e-coaching, it feels like you're working with a coach. And you'll see I've even shared some questions here. You'll get to see those in a minute. So I might say, okay, we spent an hour together, and I say, go and do a effective feedback module. It'll take you an hour to do. Boom, it feels like an hour-long coaching session right there. So it really maximizes your time in this sort of what we call high-touch approach. So the methodology that we use in our coaching, I think this is important to share, because if you've ever talked with other coaches before, sometimes it's a little unclear really what the approach is, what the structure is, and how they go through it. So the methodology that we use, which we've created ourselves, is the ADIT model. And I don't know if you can see the visual real great. It's a screenshot, so I apologize. But on the bottom, it goes through assess, discover, implement, and transition. And every coaching session that we do, so it could be myself or it could be Jill doing health and wellness, any of them, will use this form, this model as we go through the coaching. Now, the thing about it is it allows us to be more structured so that we ensure we're really truly getting to know you. We're really truly helping with that goal setting. We're really truly designing the right action steps and then following through to make it stick, right? So we follow that flow, but it's going to look different for every client, and it's really adapted and framed and tailored, excuse me is a better word, to each of these clients. So we might spend a little bit more time in assess just to make sure that I really, especially in leadership coaching, that I really understand what's going on, what your challenges really are. And then that way, when we do set the goals, they're very specific to what we did in the assess area so that we know exactly what you need to be focused on. Because it's one thing to just come in and say, oh, I want to do this, but let's really dive in and figure out if that's even something that you need to develop or build a skill on. So from a leadership coaching standpoint, we do a lot of strengths assessment up front to really determine what your strengths are so that we can upgrade you to that next level. From, again, it's like that concept of kind of going from good to great, sort of upgrading within that level of your own strengths. But we also do 360 assessments. So we will get feedback from your employees, your peers, and your leaders to see what do they say your strengths are and what do they say you have some areas of opportunity in, and are they in alignment with some of the things that you said your opportunities for improvement are in. So we use all of those tools in order to really set the right goals and assign the right modules and really do the right work to move forward to elevate you to that next level. So I mentioned the e-coaching technology. You might be able to see this, but this is just a quick screenshot of what it looks like. So this particular one is from the active listening module. It's just three questions and a whole slew of them. So there's a combination of a little bit of training and education. There's some videos. Sometimes there's articles to go read, and then these questions which mimic the coaching experience. Once clients fill these out, they come to me in full. So I have, or whoever the coach is, excuse me. But when my leadership clients fill this out, they come back to me and I'm able to read it. And I can really go back and learn a little bit about them based off of what they put. So this first question, and I'll read it in case you can't read it here, but think about a time when you're expressing something important and you felt like the other person was completely distracted. You know, what were they doing? How did you feel? What was your response? You would put something in there. So this is just, again, around active listening. So it gives me some insight as to the experiences that you've had, how it makes you feel when someone is or isn't actively listening to you, if you even recognize what it really is and why it's important. And there are a whole slew of questions that you go through within the 13 different modules, active listening being just one, that will kind of help to get us to where you're at and what we need to be focused on within your sessions. Framework, I always think this is important. I just want to give you a little bit of a hint. So I mentioned there's 13 modules, but we touch on things like culture and vision. The 3 areas that we spend a ton of time in are active listening, deep questioning, and effective feedback. So really getting those strong coaching-like leadership skills honed in so that you can grow your team and empower your team and all that stuff we talked about today, right? Build trust, getting back to that point where everyone feels really psychologically safe. Everyone's getting that sort of equal amount of your time fairly in one-on-ones and getting the growth opportunities that they may need or want. Of course, we talk about coaching framework and just how to coach individuals and teams in general, what it looks like, how every individual is very uniquely different and what that might mean for you in your process. There's a lot of other topics that we cover, like today we talked about the ladder of inference. That's something that comes up a lot in our coaching. Emotional intelligence is definitely something we talk about a lot as well, especially from that self-awareness piece and that empathy piece being really key and a focus area, especially right now. Bias, we did a webinar on that the other day. It's something we talk about a lot too. Do you have bias in your hiring, maybe even in the way you run your staff meetings, who you're always calling on, who you're not calling on, all those types of things. Just getting really clear about how those can impact your team and your leadership development. Okay, so what's included, I mentioned this a few times, but there's 13 e-coaching modules. I'd say on average they all take about 60 minutes to complete. So I kind of tell people it's like getting double the amount of coaching basically. You get 12 one-on-one 60-minute coaching sessions, which I recommend to be used bi-weekly, which means it takes about 6 months for it to be completed. I mentioned that 360 feedback. We do it in the beginning, the middle, and the end. Some people only do it at the beginning and the end. That's sort of up to you, but it's really just that great check-in point to see where did you start and where did you go by the end of the journey. What did people say were your strengths before and then at the end? Areas of opportunities, did we see some improvements? You know, what did we see there? We have a lot of different leadership tools and resources that are designed specifically for folks that are going through Elevate or leadership coaching, and those are provided as supplemental to the program. We have access to our ALV Connect Slack channel. That's just, if you aren't on it, it's just basically our Slack channel where all of our current and former clients will collaborate, and we have a lot of different conversations going on there all the time, in addition to all of our coaches hang in and hang out there to answer any questions or provide support as needed. And then I always like to tell people there's always the opportunity to get support between sessions, whether it's text, email, phone call. Just today I had a client who was doing a negotiation and she wanted some help. We got on the phone for 10 minutes this morning. No big deal. Just gave her a little bit of extra support so that she felt like she had everything that she needed ready and prepped to move forward. And the program, when you buy it in full, is the $37.50, which I put here just for reference. And then go ahead and take a read of this if you're hanging in with me here. I don't want to read this out loud to you, but at the next page or the last page, I'm going to share the links to the program. And we do have the opportunity to purchase in front or to do a payment plan, and I will be providing a 10% off coupon as well. I don't normally share a lot of testimonials, and frankly, for not only myself and Amalvita, you can find them everywhere. You can find them on my team page, you can find them on my Yelp page. I can email you 50,000 more of them. I get them for pretty much every client. And I was talking to our CEO this morning, and she said she'd have to go pull the numbers, but we've had thousands of clients within the company. So there's more out there than you can even count. But this one I love because it was very specific to Elevate. So Nanda went through Elevate. She really enjoyed the experience. What I thought was really important is the second paragraph, where she said the modules help to keep me on track and provided great examples and resources that will continue to refer back and use. So in her case, she actually had some of the content where she's like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to use this. Like, this is something I can do over and over and over again. Investing in this program was the best decision that I have ever made. So she was in healthcare, in the process of transitioning to a new and unique different role in healthcare, but managing a team of about, I think her team was like 30 people. So it was a little bit crazy for her. And she really honed in and loved the coaching skills that she got, the active listening, the deep questions, and the effective feedback, because it was just really applicable in her space to be able to provide support to her team that way on a daily basis. Okay, so we are kind of at the end here, the questions tab. I want to make sure if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in, and Randall-Lynn will share them with me. Oh, Randall-Lynn, I totally forgot to tell them at the beginning to put those questions in. I was going to ask you about 5 slides ago to put questions in, and I totally forgot. So I apologize that this has crept up on you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in. Questions might be something specifically around the content or related to your team. If you have a situation you're unsure of. If you have other ideas that you want to share, please don't hesitate to share those as well. And then just lastly, if you use the 10% off code 10OFF-ALV, you will get 10% off whether you enroll as full or payment plan. The payment plan is monthly, so you can think of it as just, wait, is it monthly? No, weekly, excuse me, weekly, split out into 12 payments. Randall, is that right? Is it split into 12? Is that what I remember properly?
Yeah, so it's weekly for 12 weeks, and then those sessions with Jen never expire, so you can either have them on that weekly cadence or bi-weekly as Jen suggested.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for highlighting that too. Yeah, people always get, well, are they gonna go away? No. They're there for you to utilize. We just know that there are times where I've got a week where I can meet every week, and then maybe you have a hiccup in your calendar and you can't meet for 2 weeks. That's okay. We just work and accommodate the program, and frankly, all of our coaches, we're just very accommodating to do what makes the most sense for the client. If you do have questions for me that you don't want to put into the chat, you can email me directly at jennifer@alvcoaching.com. Or if you want to set up a one-on-one time to talk more about coaching, what it might look like for you, whether it's I want to do Elevate, but I think I want to do this instead or something along those lines, you can just schedule some time with me. The bit.ly, which is case sensitive, by the way, lowercase talk to Jen would be a great way to do that. So, but I'm going to stop talking. So Randall-Lynn, are there any kind of last comments, questions, anything in the queue?
I do. I have 2 currently for you, and I'm sure more will come in as we discuss these. But to get started, how do you avoid / should you avoid pally individuals or friends?
Okay, I think I misheard part of what you said. So how should you avoid what individuals?
So the words directly used here are pally, but I think it would mean like individuals who might look like clique-ish to other people in your team. How do you avoid it, and should you avoid it?
Okay, so sorry, for some reason I think it said tally, and I'm like, I can't figure out what tally would mean there. Pally, got it. Pal, yep, love it. I don't want to make an assumption, but this sounds to me like, would this be a situation where the manager feels like they're pals with people on the team, or just other people palling up?
That was not specified. I would say maybe like your team palling up if you're trying to create a more kind of like inclusive playing field.
Sure. Yeah, good, okay. Understood. So I think this is another one, anyone who's worked with me, it depends on the situation, right? You hear me say that all the time. And it does depend on the people, and it depends on your team and all of that. And the reason I do say that is, to be honest, it's from personal experience. So I had a team once that was 3 people. There's 3 men on the team. 2 of the men were pally, and the other one was a recluse, basically, not only by choice, but also because the other 2 alienated him. That created a horrible team dynamic, right? Because 2/3 of your team is off being best friends and chums and working well and collaborating while leaving someone else in the dust. So that would be a situation where I would say, yeah, you need to do something about that. But if you have a team of 10 or 15 people and you just have a couple people who have created great relationships, those friendships can be really great for them. It's okay to have conversation around it and talk about it in the one-on-ones. Hey, I noticed that you and Sally are really close. That's really exciting. Like, are you working on projects together? Like, how can you roll it into what's relevant to the work setting? So there is a little bit of a balance on the situation and your team itself. But I do think that it is something to always be watching out for, because to your point, it can get to the point where, if you have lots of people grouping up, or it's 2 now, but then maybe it's 3, and then maybe it's 4, and then all of a sudden half the team is best friends, and then everyone else feels really sort of left in the dark. So making sure you're having those sort of transparent conversations with the individuals one-on-one about what's going on, and maybe even what that looks like and how it can be interpreted, especially if it's someone who maybe they want to be promoted to manager and they want your job. Well, they're not going to be able to do that very well if they're not being all-inclusive to everyone in the group, right? So it's like, what are their own goals, and are they attaching and tying to those goals, or are they hurting themselves by doing this? Or maybe they are even going to literally become the manager of the team. Well, or do they have friendships with half the team that then are going to be really challenging, or that they're going to have to cut off? So it's sort of like a balance depending on what it is that they have going on and what their own future goals are. I do think it's an extremely important topic of conversation. And then just in general, from the managerial standpoint, it's probably easier in the remote setting than it would be in the in-person setting, because in an in-person setting, you're going to have your people, they come into staff and they probably sit next to each other, right? So you're physically going to have to say, okay, everyone, we're going to sit in different spots today, or, we're going to go on a walk instead, or you have to physically do something to sort of actually shake some of that up a little bit. But when you're in a Zoom meeting, everyone has a box, everyone has a seat at the table, and everyone has equal presence. So how do you ensure that within that equal presence, you're equally calling on others, or you're challenging others to equally call on others? And it could even be I'm going to ask a question, and then I point to Randall-Lynn, and I say, Randall-Lynn, you answer, and then you ask the next question, and you point to someone new. And we just do this thing where we go around until everyone has both asked and answered a question, for example, right? So there's just little dynamics and tricks within your own team that you could utilize. So what I would kind of wrap this up with is situational dependent, but be thinking about how it can be a big disadvantage if there's a very small team, or if the individual is on a growth trajectory on their own. And then kind of lastly with that being work with your coach to determine exactly what's going on with your team and how you can create a dynamic situation for you alone.
Love it. Other question we had, guys, I do apologize. It looks like we're going to go just a hair over today. Like I said before, you'll get the copy of this recording in your inbox later this afternoon. So if you have to hop off here right at the hour, that's totally fine. All of this will be sent to your inbox for you to review when you have a spare moment. But on that note, Jen, what can managers do to foster trust with someone who joined an established team and does not appear to be adapting well?
Yeah, so I would say definitely use your skills on that one-on-one level. So it might be harder for them from a peer perspective to join the team, but if you can create that dynamic where they feel seen and heard by you as the leader, that's going to really help, because once you and that individual have trust built, it's going to be much more likely that it will allow them to kind of come into the fold. There is just a level of, some teams are really hard. It's kind of like we say, when you leave a job, it's because you had a really bad manager or because the culture of the company was horrible or something, right? Like, there are also just really bad toxic teams. So if that is the case, then the individual is going to have to do some assessment to figure out if it's the right fit for them. But at a minimum, do what you can. Do what's in your control, right? So build that trust on your own, and then do the things where, as a group setting, like, hey, I want to try to build more trust within this group. I want to try to get us all to get to know each other, whether it's the appropriate level of icebreaker, the at-home show and tell. Maybe you implement a leaders teaching leaders where every week one new person is asked to teach something, but something where somehow everyone feels, again, seat at the table, engaged, equal opportunity to share and participate, that type of thing. Then you can kind of be doing it both one-on-one and as much as you can in the setting that you can do it. And then don't be afraid to have the conversation from a development standpoint with those that might be alienating or leaving others out, and sort of talking to them about what that looks like, what the perception is, what's going on there. Is this a dynamic that you want for the rest of your career? Anything that's really going to help them with their own growth and development. People are pretty receptive to hearing that if it's in the right context, if it's, set in a safe way and using like a really effective feedback framework model, like what we go through and share with people, and kind of how to do it in a way that doesn't point too much blame, but allows them to understand the impact that they're having and the shift that they can make. So just a few ideas there.
I love it. That was all the questions we had for today. So like I said, this will be sent to you in your inbox later this afternoon. You can feel free to reach out to Jen or myself if you have any questions about anything, and we look forward to seeing you at more webinars in the future. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.